Hello and welcome to the July edition of On the Horizon, our monthly podcast dedicated to helping you navigate through the tricking world of golf course turf maintenance by helping you to look and think a little further forward. I'm Henry Bechley from ICL.
And I'm Glenn Kirby from Syngenta. It's July, Henry.
Yes.
Do you know what that means?
Pims, Glenn?
Well, yes. And it's an Open Championship special, Henry.
It is, Glenn, because in part 2, we have your extended chat with the one and only James Bledge, who is the course manager at Royal Liverpool Golf Club, isn't he? And you interviewed him a little while ago as he was preparing, and still is no doubt, for his first Open. And of course, it's really good of James to let us all in on how he was doing.
I know, it was great. Thank you, James. And so if you're just tuning in just for that,
yes,
then you might be best skipping the next hour. Because in the next hour, we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of all of our upcoming agronomic challenges.
Yes.
And it's not for everyone, is it, Henry?
No, if we're honest, probably not, Glenn. Because although we both clearly enjoy digging into the recent climatic data or discussing player expectations or the agronomic challenges for the month ahead, it might not be everyone's cup of tea.
Or coffee.
Indeed, Glenn.
So skip on forward, listen to James, and then maybe scoot back and give us a go.
Yeah.
But if you're a regular, then stick around because there's more of that to come.
Oh, great. And so is there anything to get excited about, Glenn?
Yes, there is, Henry. I have written another poem.
Oh, that.
Yes, indeed.
Goodness. So how many have we got left?
There's only 8 left to go now, Henry.
Are you sure it's that many? You've got to be miscounting. It feels like this has been going on for years now.
No, there's definitely 8 left.
All right, okay. Well, let's get it over with then.
There's no need to be like that, Henry.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but you know.
Okay. You ready?
Yes.
In July's scorching heat, the greenkeeping brigade strive to keep the golf course in a well-groomed shade. Mowing and watering, day and night they toil. Their efforts a testament to their loyalty to the soil. But no matter how hard they work, it seems a futile quest as divots and pitch marks appear, putting their skills to the test.
Yes.
With disgruntled golfers, finned 5-irons running through the green.
Yeah.
The greenkeepers sigh and wonder, why can't they strike it clean? Yet they carry on with a smile, their spirits never cowed, for they know that come tomorrow, another challenge will abound. So here's to the greenkeeping heroes in this July's heat.
Yes.
Their dedication and humour making the golf course complete.
Very good, Glenn. That was actually really good.
Thank you, Henry.
Chat GPT?
I can't possibly say.
It'll be the end of us all, Glenn. Anyway. So, Glenn, where are we going this month on our climatical mystery tour of the UK and Ireland?
Very good, Henry.
Thank you. To see what agronomic challenges we might need to prepare for during July.
Yes. Well, because it's July and the month of the Open Championship, I thought, let's give it an Open Championship special spin.
Oh, very good, Glenn. And, we can give Royal Liverpool the heads up, can't we?
I don't think he needs our help, Henry.
No, I think you're right, actually. And he'll certainly have the benefit of more forecasting tools and supporting agronomists than he could shake a stick at.
Yes, and of course we'll hear from James himself later on.
Yeah.
So I thought we should venture further afield, Henry.
Okay.
So we're going to visit the old course at St Andrews in Scotland.
Oh, very nice. The very home of golf.
Indeed. Royal Portrush in Ireland.
Ooh, beautiful and wild. And more on that later on.
And Royal St George's at Sandwich. But their data will, of course, be very similar to the two historic venues right next to them that have also hosted the Open, Prince's and Royal Cinque Ports.
Yes, and I'm sure that we can expect some extremes for them. Mr. Larson had it hot many times when he was there. But what about Wales, Glenn? Now, I might be wrong, but I think there has never been a full-blown Open Championships in Wales.
No, not yet, Henry.
Okay, so on that basis, where are we visiting in Wales, which incidentally seems to be becoming the most agronomically challenged region of the UK and Ireland?
Well, Henry, Royal Porthcawl has held several Senior Opens events, and this year it hosts the Seniors Open again. So I think it's absolutely fair to use Royal Porthcawl as our honourable Welsh mention this month.
Very good. And quite right too. All right, so let's take a look at those climatic factors that shape our immediate agronomic destiny. So let's start as usual with the moisture balance, Glenn. And here we are talking about the monthly net moisture loss or gain.
Absolutely. So this gives us an idea of how much potential we have to dry out or even get wetter in a fixed period. We take the total rainfall for the month and we subtract the evapotranspiration.
Okay, simple stuff. But when we think about the moisture balance for our own courses, we will also need to take into account factors like soil type or course elevation or how windy the site is. And of course, what the accumulated moisture balance was going into this period, to get the true picture of your own situation in your mind as you go into July.
Indeed. And these 4 example venues are all coastal. So they are exposed to that drying wind and they're all on amazing links land, which of course is prone to drying out, giving us those firm running conditions that we hope to see during Open Week.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so let's see how they might fare or what they might expect as we head into July.
Okay, now we're looking at the last 12 years of data here to give us an idea of what's happened in recent years. And we're going to start with St Andrews. So a dry year for them. They are 101 millimetres drier at the end of July than they are at the start of it.
Okay.
A wet year for them. They are 7 millimetres wetter at the end of July than at the start.
Okay.
And in an average year, they are 33 millimetres drier at the end of the month than when they started.
And so we can start to see why July is generally the time when we'll see really firm course conditions developing, like last year's Open, for instance. But whilst we can be pretty confident that it will be dry for them, it's certainly not guaranteed. I remember being there in 2010 when Louis Oosthuizen ran away with it, and that was a damp one, I think.
Yep, it was indeed. So let's look to Royal Porthcawl in Wales. A dry year for them is 127 millimetres drier. A wet year for them is 43 millimetres wetter at the end of the month than when they started.
Yes.
And an average year for them is 47 millimetres drier.
Yeah. Okay. So Wales again showing a potential for greater extremes or being a bit of a lottery once again.
Indeed. Royal Portrush over in Ireland. A dry year for them is 69 millimetres drier. A wet year is 15 millimetres wetter. That's 1.5. And an average year for them is 15 millimetres drier at the end of July than when they started it.
Okay, so maybe more consistent there than Royal Porthcawl, but not as dry as either St Andrews or Royal Porthcawl in a dry year.
Indeed. Okay, so now let's go down to the Sandwich Trio.
Well, it's got to be dry down there, Glenn.
Well, of course, you're right, Henry. And for them, a dry year is 167 millimetres drier at the end of July than the start. That's right, nearly 170 millimetres drier. A wet year for them, Henry, is only 36 millimetres drier. So even in their wettest years, it's still 36 millimetres drier at the end of the year. And an average year is 92 millimetres drier. So in an average July, they dry out 92 mil.
Yeah, that really is toast, isn't it? And of course, even in a wet year, they're drying out, Glenn.
A toasted sandwich, Henry.
Well, it's got to be a tune amount every time, Glenn.
No, Henry, it was a joke.
Ah. Anyway, so the take-home message here is that you needed to have started really early with your surfactants and, of course, always use the best you can get.
Yep, we have Quilibra and TriSmart being used successfully down there. And if you're listening to this in late June and looking for some rain to coincide with your next application, then good luck with that and make sure you're ready to go.
Yeah, it's never easy, Glenn.
It never is.
No. Right, so moving on to the temperatures in July. What about the extremes that they might have been experiencing in that regard in recent years?
Okay, so St Andrews, the highest they have seen in July in the last 12 years is 35 degrees.
Whoa.
But the lowest they've seen, and this is interesting, is 3.1 degrees.
Whoa, so it's not just about the highs then. That, up at St Andrews there, they might see some quite low temperatures too. And thinking about it again, I must go to the Open quite often because I remember a cold Open up the road at Carnoustie one year when the Pro Shop was doing an absolute roaring trade in hand warmers.
Yes, a bobble hat at the Open isn't unheard of, is it?
No.
Okay, Royal Porthcawl, the highest they've experienced in July in the last 12 years, 37.5 degrees, and their lowest temperature, 5.5.
Okay.
We're going over to Royal Portrush, the highest they've seen in recent years, 29.2, and the lowest they've seen, 4.6 degrees. Okay, and now we're going to go down to the bottom to the Sandwich Trio, where they have experienced 39 degrees as a maximum temperature and a lowest temperature in the last 12 years in July of 7.5 degrees.
That's interesting, isn't it? Because we naturally look at those highs and fear the stress that they can cause the turf, but there might also be some lows to think about too. There in Sandwich, you just said, didn't you, that the coldest might be 7.5, but up in Scotland they might get as low as 3 degrees. So we still need to keep an eye on the weather forecast, so to know what is coming down the line temperature-wise, because it might be significant.
Yeah, we certainly do.
Okay, so what about the daytime and nighttime averages, Glenn?
Well, let's take a look. So up to St Andrews, daytime average for them 18.8 degrees and their nighttime average 10 degrees.
Okay.
Down to Wales to Royal Porthcawl, daytime average of 19.7 with a nighttime average of 12.4. Then over to Royal Portrush, daytime average of 17.5 with a nighttime average of 10.5. And last but not least, the Sandwich Trio, daytime average of 22 degrees with a nighttime average of 13 degrees.
Yeah, so there are differences there, but they are quite similar actually on average, aren't they? It's warm in the day and mild at night. So if coupled with some moisture as well, then the rapid development of some turf diseases might start to enter the game.
That's right. Yellow tuft, brown patch, whitea patch, anthracnose and dollar spot, they all enjoy those temperatures.
Yeah,
and we can now go around 8 weeks for some areas of the country where we just don't drop below that 10-degree figure. And, that is just perfect for those summer fungal pathogens to get going. And that period does seem to be getting a little longer year on year, but we'll go into that a little bit more later on.
Okay. So moving on, what about those growth degree days and the primo intervals that we might be employing during July?
Yes, growth degree days are the accumulated daily heat units, and they're calculated by subtracting a base temperature, in this situation 0 degrees, from the average temperature for the day. And then we can use the accumulated total of that And in our situation, we're using 200 as our threshold.
Okay.
And we can use that as a way to optimize our treatment intervals for things like Primo Max.
Indeed. So how are those treatment intervals generally looking for those far-flung sites that we're looking at during July?
Okay, so if we go to St Andrews, a hot year, we would recommend using that GDD program interval between Primo applications at 12 days.
Oh, okay.
In a cold year, we would recommend 15 days, and an average year, 14 days. If we go down to Royal Porthcawl, a warm year for them is 11 days, a cold year for them is 14 days, and an average July for them is 12 days.
Okay.
Over to Portrush, a warm July is 12 days, a cold July is 15 days, and an average July, 14 days.
Okay.
And then down to the Sandwich Trio, which is the warmest out of these four. A hot July for them is 10 days, a cold July is 13 days, and an average July is 12 days.
Interesting, Glenn. So it looks like we've now settled into a fortnightly cycle for the treatment of our greens with Primo.
Yes, July and August are so consistent on this because of those warm overnight temperatures.
Yes.
It is possible to get those real low temperatures we highlighted at the beginning, but they just don't hang around for long. So my advice would be just lock it in at 14 days for the next 2 months and enjoy the summer routine. When we get to September, we can start thinking about stretching them out again. But when it's hot, Henry, those gibberellic acid inhibitors will perform for a couple of weeks.
Okay.
Growth doesn't just explode on the last day of that. Suppression gradually fades out. But please don't fool yourself into thinking it's lasting much longer than that 2-week period in July. Look, Primo has got a great label that allows us to do that in the UK. Let's make the most of it.
Okay, well, do you fear the worst for the label then, Glenn?
Well, we just have to see, Henry. I don't think I fear the worst. It's next up for renewal in 2027, and the goalposts could certainly have moved by then. But generally, when renewing products, they lock these labels in once they are granted and nothing changes. As things stand, we're really confident on its re-registration later down the line, but we always have to have our eyes on that horizon.
Yeah, that regulatory horizon always seems to loom the largest, Glenn.
It does. Now, that's for greens and tees, Henry, and places where we've got good levels of irrigation.
Okay.
On longer areas of turf, like fairways and the roughs, that longer leaf will absorb more Primo, so we can get wider and longer optimal application intervals. But those large areas will probably be going into some kind of weather-induced regulation now. You know, in most years, drought will have been kicking in or a bit of heat stress. But some years, if it's wet, then we can get really high levels of growth. And there we may look to use that kind of 21-day interval between our Primo applications just to help us out.
Okay.
But if Mother Nature is slowing things down, wide-scale Primo applications are probably not the best use of our budgets at the moment. The work of Primo in these areas is done in the build-up to drought stress to ensure we have a really healthy turf plant that will cope with the stress best possible and come out as quickly as possible at the back end. Once we get to our tees and greens, though, where we've got irrigation at this time of year, the high overnight temperatures do result in a very regular interval range of 10 to 14 days. And that's why I just keep coming back to, in the summer, in irrigated areas, lock it in on a 14-day spray interval.
Very good.
Okay, simple enough.
It certainly is. Right, so moving on. This year, we have been focusing pretty heavily on the potential for the development of dollar spot disease, and we've been using the Smith's-Kearns model to help guide our maintenance strategy by giving us a sort of calculation of the level of risk of a potential outbreak.
Yes, the Smith-Kearns model is a predictive tool that takes into account specific weather conditions, namely temperature and humidity, to estimate the risk of dollar spot pressure.
Yeah, and you input your own data, don't you, each day to see how that risk is building.
That is correct.
But for our purposes now, we have to look back at previous year's data, don't we?
Yes.
And so how has it looked for our links sites in this regard? The building, dollar spot risk in previous Julys?
Good question. So what I've done here is work out how many days we're above that 20% pressure threshold.
Okay.
The 20% pressure threshold is where we start moving into serious dollar spot pressure. And we've looked at that on that Smith-Cohen's model over the last 12 years.
Okay.
So St Andrews, in a low dollar spot pressure year, they see 4 days above 20% in July.
Okay.
In a high dollar spot pressure year, they see about 23 days over that 20% in July.
Right.
And in an average year, they're looking at about 13 days up at St Andrews.
Okay, so it depends on the weather, doesn't it?
Royal Porthcawl, a low pressure year for them is 8 days. A high pressure year for them is 31 days, the entire month, Henry. And an average year for them, not far away from the high pressure, 25 days of the month above 20% for Royal Porthcawl.
Yeah, so a lot higher pressure for them.
Certainly is. And if we go over to Royal Portrush, a low pressure year for them is 12 days above 20%.
Okay.
A high pressure year is 29 days above that 20%. And in an average year, they see 22 days of the month above 20%.
Wow, so that's high too, and higher than I would have expected, I think.
Let's go down to the Sandwich Trio. Low pressure years for them, 8 days above 20% in July. A high pressure year, 29 days in July. And an average year, 18 days above 20%.
Yeah, so it's not just about the temperature, is it?
No, humidity plays a big role here too.
Yeah, because the temperatures were, well, I think, generally higher down there, but they've got slightly lower pressure than Porthcawl, don't they? So, yeah, interesting stuff. And we can see clearly that the pressure can really start to mount up during July if those conditions are conducive. You know, stressed turf, high temperatures and humidity, droughted soils, and periods of leaf wetness are all important, aren't they? And that can really start the pressure building.
Exactly. This is the 8-10 week period now, Henry, that we really have to up our game with those cultural practices to keep this pathogen at bay.
Indeed, and we'll talk about all that a bit later on. But typically, this all happens when the best golfers in the world might be turning up to become the champion golfer of the year. Once again, Glenn, it's never easy.
That's both the challenge and the charm of it, Henry.
Okay, Glenn. So what about those golfer expectations? I'm thinking that we should really be at the absolute top of our game in July.
Of course we should.
Yes, this is the month of delivering high standards throughout the course. The player expectations will be at their absolute peak, and the Open at Hoylake will undoubtedly inspire every golfer to demand even higher standards of their own course.
Yes, and the greenkeeping teams will be busy keeping conditions and presentation optimal, dealing with those extremes whilst aiming to bring it all home. July offers opportunities, doesn't it, to present fast running courses that golfers really do enjoy, albeit with some drought stress in there. But the work routine and the patterns are generally well established by now that all allow the teams to, deliver and bring it home.
Yeah, and things like hand watering might be common practice by now, which would be maybe offset by less mowing demands if the course is becoming toasty. My agronomic visits, I remember, were sort of generally positive at this time, with everything hopefully running smoothly and with little to change, really, only minor tweaks maybe. We'd sort of generally be focusing on fine-tuning the surface preparations, using testing equipment, and mainly casting our minds ahead to the renovation work in August and that busier month to come.
Yes, hopefully this is a time to gather ourselves.
Yeah, and July is one of the few times when we might have some control over how firm things can get, and hopefully James at Royal Liverpool will get to really ramp up those Clegg readings to provide that true test of golf that the Open aims for.
Yes, for many courses, July is when we start to really firm up. Now, if your golfers have been playing on more receptive greens for the last 8 months, sometimes they'll make their thoughts known about their new golfing struggles. So that's a fun experience for everyone.
Yeah.
Watching thinned 5-irons run through greens, followed by frustrated comments. But it's an opportunity to point out that you could and should be firmer in the other 8 months rather than softer now. So use that opportunity to push for some investment in drainage, investment in top dressing, and maybe giving you the gaps for good aeration windows.
Yeah, strategies like top dressing, aeration, and fertilisation are all really important if we're looking to mitigate turf stresses. And so these should not be overlooked, although it's tempting to drop them out of our routines during this kind of peak time for golf.
Yeah, even though they're out there playing and it's an important time of year, we've just got to keep going with those strategies.
Yes, we do. So, in summary, July means delivering on high expectations through established maintenance routines that allow greenkeeping teams the chance to truly showcase the course in its peak condition. But stresses can continue to mount, and so ongoing vigilance and proactive management strategies are required to maintain those playing qualities and presentations through this, what can be quite a stressful month too.
We shouldn't be overlooking the value of investment at this time either.
Yes, exactly. We always need to have our eyes on that horizon too.
So, Henry, what are the agronomic risks that may face us in July?
Well, Glenn, if our agronomic priority for the greens is surface smoothness, then I suppose the risks would be anything that might affect that.
Yes, because we want to eradicate any chatter, or we want to stop that from entering the game, don't we?
Yes, smoothness is the key, and our surface refinements should have done the job by now.
And the power seeding should have slowed and hopefully disappeared by now.
Yes, and so this is the time when we're primarily worried about forms of potential deterioration that could cause a backward step in that regard.
Yes, and because the surface preparations will have been at full tilt now for a good few weeks, there is, of course, a danger of the greens just running out of steam in July.
Yes, there is. And we know from the weather data that July is a drying time, potentially, and the light intensities are at their height, and we might also have some serious temperatures to contend with, and so the environmental stresses might also be seriously in the game and conspiring against us.
Yes, and we know that the problems start when the stresses combine.
Yes, anthracnose in particular is a danger, isn't it, in that regard? But also dollar spot could take advantage of those intense summer conditions in July too.
Yes, and so stress management mitigation strategies are very much in our thoughts.
They are, because disease is a smoothness issue, and if we experience steamy conditions during the summer, hot and damp or even wet, then other diseases might also enter the game, as you have already mentioned, Glenn. Conducive conditions might give rise to some more of the exotic turf diseases that we can experience at this time, which can be problematic and damaging, especially if we haven't encountered them before and don't really see them coming.
So we're looking to prevent deterioration in July. Shall we start with stress mitigation and then run through some of the potential disease occurrences?
Okay, why not? And so in our previous episodes, I have been advocating a focus on putting green smoothness to achieve our performance goals, because it generally requires a less aggressive approach than if we were targeting just green speed. And so by taking this approach, we are looking to reduce the risk of ramping up the stress levels, really, and all the problems that can bring.
And Fracnose is the big one there, isn't it?
Yeah, and we've been banging on about that all year, haven't we?
Yes,
and
we have.
Yeah, and so ideally, our surface preparations would involve things like sustainable mowing heights, brushing, grooming, light verticutting, top dressing, turf ironing, etc.
And using Primo Max.
Yeah, all supported with appropriate nutrition and moisture management strategies to perfect the surfaces, but whilst also reducing the risk of compounding stresses running out of control and things like anthracnose jumping in as a result.
Yes, but with the season having been fully up and running for a couple of months now, those pressures can still build, can't they?
Yeah, they can, no matter what we do. And so quite a lot of our programs can be a little bit defensive at this time, and we tend to build in a touch of maybe extra nutrition to make sure that the greens don't run out of steam and fall into that anthracnose trap.
Okay, so what are we thinking then?
Well, it might just be a temporary increase in the level of nitrogen in the liquid program at this time if needed, or maybe build in a light dressing of something like a slow release granular fertilizer to carry the greens through to their August renovations. The Sierra Form GT Double K CalMag, which is a 7/014 analysis applied at 20 to 25 grams per meter squared, is a favourite at this time to build in an extra element of resilience or stress tolerance, which is especially helpful if you are for some reason wanting to turn the screw a little bit.
Yes, and more of that in part 2 with James.
Yeah, so the double K applied at 20 grams per metre squared would supply 14 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare over a 5 to 6 week period, which would equate to an extra 2.5 to 3 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare per week on average, which, along with your liquids, would give a quiet supporting boost at this pivotal time to improve plant health, but without spending too much of your nitrogen budget for the year.
Yes, and we've spoken about the importance and impact of adding extra nitrogen too, haven't we? And particularly at this time when it comes to guarding against anthracnose. We spoke about that last month when we were discussing that high cure trial data.
Yeah, that was really good, wasn't it? And it just showed that, you know, getting your nutrition right at this time can make all the difference.
Okay, and so what about our other stress mitigation strategies?
Well, there's lots to be thinking about, really, but monitoring the soil moisture content remains important to guide our irrigation strategies, and sort of the dovetailing of hand watering with the use of overall irrigation to get that sort of consistency of moisture contents, really.
It's really important to try and stay inside those target volumetric moisture content ranges, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, leading with hand watering of those localized dry areas and the use of good, efficient irrigation systems, utilizing weather-based controllers or even soil moisture sensors where we can. And they're becoming increasingly more common. Yeah. And that can all help to optimize water use by providing irrigation based on real-time weather conditions and real soil moisture levels.
Yes, things are moving forward, aren't they, in that regard? And we always discuss the importance of using quality wetting agent or surfactant technology in a programmed approach to improve water infiltration and distribution through the soil profile and minimizing the risk of localized dry patch developing.
And growth regulators?
Yeah, really important. You know, applying plant growth regulators such as Primo Max can really help us mitigate those abiotic stresses such as drought, heat and wear, which tend to ramp up at this time.
And what about tank mixing with Stress Buster?
Of course, tank mixing with Stress Buster and using it with Rider as well can produce terrific results. You know, the old fortnightly mix, which we introduced a few years ago, which had Quilibra in there too, actually, works a treat at this time because, you know, it's covering a lot of bases, isn't it, with regard to stress management. You've got sort of nutrition, you've got surfactants in there, and you've got your Primo in there as well. So, and above all else, actually, we're thinking about those light intensity levels. It's really important that the pigments are in there if the weather really does ramp up, because light intensity or UV intensity can cause problems, and it's at its very height now, isn't it?
That's right. Specialist turf pigments like Rider can be used to reduce the negative impact of that UV light on golf green turf. Now, that UV radiation can cause damage to turf grass, leading to various problems such as reduced photosynthesis, cell damage, and overall decline in turf health. These turf pigments act as a protective barrier by absorbing and reflecting that UV light and minimising its harmful effects.
Yes, and based on my experience of trialling Rider at this time of year, it would definitely be in the spray tank in July. So with that in mind, Glenn, what rate of application do you tend to recommend for Rider at this time, Glenn?
Well, my rule of thumb, Henry, is to apply around 1 litre of Rider per month. So if you're going out there fortnightly, then put 500 millilitres in the tank per hectare.
Very good. Simple enough.
Okay, so what about those diseases, the exotics? They might come into the fore in July, mightn't they?
Yes, they might. And there are a few that might rear up depending on how the weather drops, really.
Okay, let's start with brown patch.
Brown patch is caused by the fungal pathogen Rhizoctonia solani, and it is moderately common in golf turf in the UK and Ireland. It tends to develop as broadly circular patches of discoloured turf, brown, ranging from a few inches to more than a foot in diameter. So it can be extremely damaging given the right conditions.
Okay, so what conditions would favour its development then?
Well, brown patch thrives in warm and humid conditions, typically when temperatures are between 20 and 30 degrees C.
And moisture?
Yeah, obviously, overwatering in particular or prolonged periods of rainfall can create excessively moist conditions that promote the development of the disease.
Anything else to think about?
Yes. Overly excessive nitrogen fertilization could stimulate lush growth in turf grass, making it more susceptible to this disease.
Okay, so avoid over-applying nitrogen, especially during periods of warm and humid weather.
And also taking into account things like poor air circulation or heavy thatch levels, both can contribute to the development of the disease by creating a more conducive environment for the fungus to develop.
Okay, and general plant health?
Is always important, so let's not weaken the turf unduly, especially in those warm and damp conditions.
Okay, so we're in the territory of sensible management practices now to reduce the risk of attack.
Yes.
But if it becomes warm and humid, then we may be on our guard for brown patch.
Yeah. But early, with all diseases, early identification is the key. But if we do start identifying an outbreak, what fungicides, Glenn, might be able to help?
Okay, fungicide applications may be necessary in severe cases, but they should be used judiciously and in accordance with the label instructions. It is on the heritage label, and that should be applied preventatively or as early as possible to prevent the development and reduce the spread of this disease. I've seen some interesting results when people have spot sprayed for anthracnose, Henry. The areas that they treated for that anthracnose have stayed clean of both anthracnose and brown patch, and that the areas that were untreated, they tended to be kind of lower lying greens that stressed less because they were in a bit more shade and a bit damper.
Yes.
They then became subject to high brown patch pressure disease. So we've got to adopt a spray strategy now, and this is what we've done there. They've sprayed all 18 greens now as a kind of anthracnose and the brown patch preventative. It's very difficult to separate out the disease challenges around this time of year, as they've all got very similar drivers, stress,
yes,
high thatch levels, warm overnight temperatures. It triggers them all.
Yes, that is interesting, isn't it? Very good, Glenn.
Okay, what about white-ear patch then, Henry? We tend to get a few reports of this, don't we? But it's not particularly widespread or that damaging at the moment.
No, yeah, it always crops up, doesn't it? Because it's kind of quite spectacular.
It's pretty.
Yeah, so white ear or brown ring patch is caused by the fungal pathogen, wait for it, White ear circinata.
Nice.
And thanks. And it often forms circular or irregular ring-like patches. And these patches or rings can range in size from a few inches to several feet in diameter. And they may have a characteristic yellow or bronze coloration.
Okay, so when might this one develop?
Well, Whitea patch tends to develop during cooler and wetter periods of summer weather that we might experience in the UK and Ireland. I mean, excessive moisture is important, and so overwatering again or prolonged periods of rainfall can contribute to its development.
And again, is turf health a factor?
Yeah, always. Weak or stressed turf will be more susceptible to Whitea patch, and factors that weaken the turf, such as poor nutrition, improper mowing practices. You've heard all this before. Excessive thatch accumulation can increase the risk of disease development. Shaded areas, like with brown patch, with low light intensity, can also provide favourable conditions for the development of Whitea patch disease.
And so we're in the territory of good management practice again.
We are.
That will all help to reduce the risk of the development of Whitea patch.
Yeah, avoid overwatering. Try to minimise leaf wetness, reduce shade if possible, increase light intensity in those areas, aerate and dethatch, and avoid things like excessive nitrogen applications. You know, in severe cases, with Whitea actually, fungicides might be necessary or tempting. So what do you think, Glenn, about that?
Well, when it comes to the control of Whitea patch on turf grass in the UK and Ireland, there are no labelled fungicides. But as part of a wholesale management strategy aimed at anthracnose, takel or brown patch, you're likely to see reduced challenges as the broader spectrum fungicides like Heritage and Acernity over in Ireland, they are all pretty effective on these kind of things. There is another strobe out there on the market that's fairly effective too, but it's not one of ours. All of these have some pretty good data in the USA. Interestingly, Medallion is also pretty effective on it too. So that's one to consider when building that integrated summer strategy, depending on your risk and your challenges. And Medallion being good on this is one of the reasons we built that into the FR321 pack, which is very effective on these summer diseases. And that can be used, and they can all be used in a bit of rotation as part of an integrated management approach on those summer diseases, depending on your risks, your setup, and your historical challenges.
Very good, Glenn.
Okay, Henry, might we see any yellow tuft?
Maybe, but it's not very common. I've seen it once, I think. Yellow tuft is actually caused by the fungal pathogen, wait for it, Scleroptera macrospora.
Very good.
Which is a waterborne pathogen, Glenn. And so again, excessive moisture, waterlogged or consistently wet conditions would provide a favourable environment for its development. Excessive rainfall, over-irrigation and poor drainage would also increase the risk of yellow tuft developing on turf grass. In terms of its sweet spot, it would develop most quickly in warmer summer conditions.
Okay, so a wet July and areas that might hold moisture might be affected.
Yeah.
But it would indicate deficiencies in your agronomic foundation on your greens too, which is certainly my experience, Henry. Where I saw it, it was a great indicator for where my irrigation system was really failing and significantly overwatering.
Yeah, absolutely. But, let's not place too much emphasis on yellow tuft because, rather than these exotics that we've just discussed, we're probably more bothered about anthracnose, as we previously discussed at the start of this section, and dollar spot, aren't we? And this is the time, as we mentioned previously, that dollar spot pressure generally starts to reach its peak.
It does. And if we look at that Smith-Kearns model, July is when it all comes to a head because we're generally right in the sweet spot for all the contributory factors.
Yeah.
All of those pressures. Dollar spot thrives in warm temperatures, which we get in July. It also gets that high humidity that it needs for its development. And in July, humidity can be high, especially during the early mornings and the evening. And we can see prolonged periods of leaf wetness, either from rainfall, irrigation or dew. And they are all critical factors for dollar spot development. And so what we can do, we can import our own course data into that Smith-Kearns model, temperature and relative humidity, and you can find that online by simply Googling it. And that will help us build this model of pressure, building a level of risk over time, which can help us guide our management strategy. It's really worth investing the time doing this to understand your site.
Yes, it is, because now is the perfect time for dollar spot to develop, especially on previously affected sites. And if we add into the mix management factors like low nitrogen levels or compromised turf health, then we can really increase the susceptibility of the sward or likelihood of dollar spot developing. And so that is why we've been focused on adequate fertilization on the run up to July to provide sufficient nitrogen to sustain turf health, but without, overdoing it.
And proper irrigation is important too, isn't it? We need to commit some time and energy to ensuring that we irrigate in an appropriate way for our construction type. And that means understanding your own greens and how they hold moisture. And that will only come from investing time in getting out there, using an accurate soil moisture probe, measuring your own volumetric moisture contents.
Yeah, and as we've discussed previously, things like turf ironing and the use of iron sulfate might also help at this time as the pressure ramps up even further. But where the pressure is extremely high and where the potential for damage might be unacceptable, we might need fungicide applications to protect important areas as well.
Yes, in severe cases or when other cultural practices are not so effective, fungicide applications may be necessary. And this is where we might need to lean on Instrata Elite to help in the UK, and we have Acernity as well over in Ireland. But hopefully our integrated management strategies have been enough to prevent that from happening.
Yeah, that's been the whole point of everything that we've said so far this year, really, isn't it?
It is. So, Henry, it feels like July's a month where we need to be mindful of the stresses.
Yes, we do. And actually, because whichever way it drops can bring different challenges of their own, can't it? Either wet or dry or hot and humid, etc. And so we've got those abiotic stresses that might enter the game, either environmental or management, or those biotic stresses that we've just been talking about that might be originating from disease or pest activity.
Yeah, and they are important because they can adversely affect some of the smoothness of our greens.
Yes, we get back to it, don't we? And when we think about it, Glenn, pretty much all of our agronomic discussions boil down to their impact on the roll of a ball.
The agronomy of smoothness.
Yes, and our concerns at this time will really be dictated by how the weather drops and impacts on our turf, and which of those agronomic threats to smoothness might potentially develop.
And so we need to get our plans in place to be able to defend against all the different eventualities.
Yeah, and especially in Wales, it turns out, depending on which way it falls.
Okay, I think we're getting somewhere now, Henry.
Oh, well, that's good, Glenn.
So, in part 2, we have something different this month.
Yes, we do, which I'm sure will be a relief to everyone. We have an Acelepryn update with Sean.
Great.
And then you have a really great chat with James Bledge as he prepares for the Open.
Yes, now there's a man with a full horizon at the moment.
Indeed. But first, it's tea break time.
It is, Henry.
Let me do the honours this time, Glenn.
Lovely. So, welcome back to our Open Championship special, July edition of On the Horizon.
Thanks, Glenn.
And this month, we're mixing up a bit in part 2 with a couple of guests.
Yes, we are, because we have Sean from Syngenta running through the new Acelepryn label, and then our star attraction, James Bledge, who will be talking with you about the run-up to the Open.
Yeah, I feel a bit sorry for Sean making his On the Horizon debut when James Bledge is headlining.
Yes.
Oh well, Sean's a top lad, and I'm sure you looked after him.
I did, Glenn.
And of course, let's not forget, we now have the immortal application
Tip of the month.
But first, it's tea break time.
It is.
So what are you drinking this month, Henry? Iced tea to cool you down during those heady days of summer?
Now, that is a nice idea, Glenn, actually, and I'm going to get back to you on that next month. But in the office, we've been drinking Caravan tea again, which is smoky, fragrant, and really strong. It really locks you in, Glenn. What about you?
No change, Henry. Instant coffee, warm and brown.
Oh.
So what have you been up to in the last month, mate?
Well, Glenn, I played a round of golf with Ed this month.
Oh, excellent. Hickory Henry had a run out, did he?
Yeah, my 1920s golf swing had a proper airing for the first time in 3 years.
Brilliant. So how was your game?
Well, it was a mixed bag, Glenn, if I'm being honest. I was good from the tee. I even drew the ball from the tee on request. Yes, it was quite good. Not bad from the ground, but I couldn't putt for toffee.
Oh, dear.
Yes, I know. Ed was my partner, and actually he displayed the patience of a saint, God bless him. I could hear his teeth grinding as another one of my approach putts sailed 10 feet past the hole. I really felt for him. In the end, he had to suffer the ultimate humiliation of being beaten by Mark and Coleman.
Oh, it was that bad.
Yeah, it was, I'm afraid. Although special mention should go to Coleman, who really entered into the spirit of the game and was strutting round the course, pacing out the yardages. Yeah, throwing up blades of grass for wind direction. He was even doing that waggling the club head address. It was fantastic.
Beautiful. He does normally give off an aura of authority.
Yes, he does. I mean, at this time, he was absolutely living every moment. But he was also like strangely serene. It was as if he was channeling both his inner Bryson DeChambeau and Johnny Logan all at once.
Was he Johnny DeChambeau?
Yeah, he was. It was brilliant. It was like watching a mythical creature.
Oh, I wish I'd seen it, Henry.
Yeah, his game was both beautiful and wild.
Like Portrush.
Yeah, he was a force of nature, Glenn.
You can't possibly hope to beat Johnny DeChambeau.
I know. Wanted. Johnny DeChambeau, dead or alive. But in fairness, he really did deserve to win. I've got no complaints. He played really well.
Yeah, well, you can't win them all, Henry.
Indeed, and speaking of that, my bowling greenkeeping experience has been more of a challenge in the last month.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. How are you getting on? Has it been testing you?
Yes, it has. It really has. We moved from establishing growth and sward refinement, to smooth out the surface in April and early May.
The agronomy of smoothness again, Henry.
Yes, indeed, Glenn, to managing a dry down from mid-May onwards, to bring about the firmness that we need to get the wood starting to run properly.
I see. So the agronomy of smoothness and firmness.
Indeed.
I presume you've moved to moisture monitoring and hand watering?
Yes, of course. May was such a dry month for us, actually, but we managed it with TriSmart in the background, obviously, and with the use of a H2 Pro hose end diluter gun pellets, all being directed by our very smart moisture probe.
Sounds good. I'm sure the bowlers have been appreciative of your team efforts.
Yeah, Glenn. Well, it's a funny business, isn't it, Glenn? As you will well know, because I've been going down to the matches in the evenings just to see how the green is playing, and because it's all about how it's playing. And I've been asking a few players for their feedback, and immediately it becomes clear that they all have a different perspective, depending on their ability or their outlook. And none of them, not a single one of them, I don't know why I think that they should, but none of them know the first thing about greenkeeping. But they all feel happy to tell you what needs to be done and where the greenkeepers are going wrong. And of course, none of it makes any sense. So you really can't discuss it properly. I'd forgotten about all that. Sometimes I really don't know whether to laugh or cry.
Welcome to greenkeeping, Henry. It's where the idea that the customer is always right is a sure road to insanity.
Yes.
But it does sound like you're enjoying it.
Yeah, it is great fun. I mean, it is madness. It's complete madness, isn't it? I've started to wonder why we do it, but actually we love it, don't we? And so that's why we do it. But it's great fun and hugely rewarding. And myself, Richard, and David are all fully obsessed with the thing. By the end of May, I think that we've got it 95% there, but it's kind of like the last 5% is always the most difficult. And so we're currently finalising our plan for the end of season renovations, with the focus being on, and you will have heard this before, reducing the influence of organic matter at the turf base and improving the quality of the grass cover.
Sounds familiar.
Yes, it does. I mean, it's standard stuff, agronomically, of course. But the green is good and playing well, but it's a work in progress, Glenn. And we're going to need a little more time to get it perfect.
Be careful, Henry. Be careful. You're getting sucked in, my friend. I remember that feeling. It's difficult to shake off. You're going to start dreaming about it soon.
I know, I am. I haven't got the right temperament for any of this. Like, any kind of negative feedback just makes my blood boil. But anyway, so I'll probably be sacked by next episode. But yeah, it's great. But I tell you what, actually, the thing that it's teaching me is that even though, you have a plan, and we do have a plan, it constantly moves around, or it adjusts with conditions subtly. The horizon that we talk about always keeps throwing us up curveballs, Glenn.
Welcome to greenkeeping, Henry. It's never easy, but remember, it's all about building those solid foundations.
Yes. Well, welcome to agronomy, Glenn, where it's all about preaching those fundamentals.
Does Johnny play bowls?
Johnny plays everything, Glenn.
Anyway. So for this next bit, I've roped in my colleague, Sean Lokes, to talk about the new Acelepryn approval and label.
Yes, great. And it's about time we got Sean on, isn't it?
Indeed. Sean is the Syngenta Technical Manager for turf and ornamentals in the UK and Ireland, now that I take on a broader international technical role.
Yes, and he really is a breath of fresh air, Glenn.
Yeah, it's great to have someone in there who knows what they're doing managing the UK.
Yes.
That last guy was a bit, well,
I do, Glenn. I really do.
Should we see what he's got to say?
Let's. Hi, Sean, and welcome to part 2 of July's On the Horizon.
Hi, Henry. Can I just start by saying I am a huge fan?
Well, of course you can, Sean, but it won't do you any good.
And full disclosure, I don't drink tea or coffee, so I'm not getting drawn into any debate on that front, sorry.
Ooh, well, that's good, because there's no time for small talk, Sean, because you have some big news for us, don't you?
Yes, I do. We now have a label registered for Acelepryn in the UK. And we've had one for a few months now in Ireland, but that's a different label. But for the UK, we now have it confirmed.
Well, that is good news. And especially because I know that these things take a huge amount of time and effort.
Yeah, it is really good news. And it certainly has been a long journey, which predates me joining Syngenta. 5 years ago, we submitted for the full authorization. And since originally submitting that label, we've had multiple limited emergency authorizations, which I know you know a lot about, Henry.
Yes, I do.
During that time, we've been working with the CRD, the Chemicals Regulation Division, to secure a full authorization.
Yeah, 5 years, Sean. That is a long time, isn't it? And of course, that's because the authorization of plant protection products is a serious business, isn't it? And it requires a lot of evidence, evaluation and consideration by the authorities.
Yeah, it's lots of negotiations, discussions, huge investment in trial work and data collection, and it's been a massive undertaking for our regulatory team. But they didn't give up. We're there now, and we have a full registration at last.
Well, great. That is good news. And thank everyone for that, because obviously it's such an important product for our industry. But even with all the hard work, it's clear to us all these days that the registrations that we receive in the UK in this case do tend to have quite a lot of precautions and restrictions associated with them.
Very true. And a celloprint is no different. Standard manufacturer statement here, always read the product label.
Yeah.
For a celloprint, as with any product, there will be guidance on how best to apply to avoid any risks to aquatic life and non-target arthropods. And as the label has taken a long time to put together on this one, it's not perfect. It's not the easiest label to understand. But I guess we had two choices at this stage. Either accept the label which was given to us, or go back and spend another couple of years submitting more data for assessment. So we've drawn a line under it. And this is what we have.
Yeah, okay, yes, and it is a little complicated, isn't it? And so you're going to need to talk us all through it, aren't you? So that we're all completely clear on how, when, and where we can safely use it.
But before digging into it, it's worth noting that, oddly, we don't write the labels. They get put together for us by the CRD based on the data that they request, which we then provide to them.
Okay.
So the terminology is not designed to confuse, but it can have that effect. Labels have specific statements and definitions, which might not mean much to us, but for example, managed amenity turf and amenity grassland. These are specific definitions from the CRD's crop definition list.
Yeah.
Okay. Firstly, the stewardship has gone, so we no longer have to fill in the forms and get the reference numbers like we did under the emergency authorization.
Yeah. Okay.
Which is good news and a shame, as we'd really like to see more stewardship with our products, as long as that was going to help us get better application labels or a wider toolbox of product options.
Yeah.
But stewardship is an expensive process. It needs real financial commitment to make it happen. And it doesn't seem to be the direction of travel in the UK at the moment.
Okay.
Secondly, we're restricted to 10% of your cut turf as a total application area.
Okay, so that's all our mown turf, is it?
Yeah, that's right. So let's do a worked example. Let's assume you had 10 hectares of fairways, 10 hectares of roughs, 2 hectares of approaches, 2 of tees, and 1 of greens.
Right.
That would total 25 hectares, allowing you to treat 2.5 hectares.
Okay. So why is there a restriction on the area that we can treat on the golf course?
Well, this has been one of the sticking points, this whole preventative versus curative application timings. Ultimately, for this type of pest control, they only want people to be spot treating areas that are primed for damage. But as an industry, we want to prevent damage, to reduce the level of risk. It's a subtle shift that I don't think they recognize the importance of. It's certainly frustrating, but that's where we are. They're trying to avoid us as an industry spraying products everywhere without thought. They want to see more monitoring and considered decision making, which leads us nicely to the third point. Monitoring and identification of insect larval populations should be undertaken where possible.
Okay.
I think Glenn kind of knew this was coming, which is why he's been making such a point of it on the podcast.
Yeah.
Insect population assessments are now part of the label, so you should monitor and record the findings.
Okay. So we need to be monitoring and recording, as you say, the location of developing infestations, because we only have 10% of the maintained areas available for treatment.
Yeah, but no stewardship, 1 application per year.
Yeah.
Areas to be treated only once.
Okay.
But if you're unlucky enough to have both chafers and leather jacket infestations, you only have a single allocation to use.
Yes.
So you may need to split that to treat different areas at different times. You've got that 0.6 litres per hectare application rate as usual.
Okay. Is there anything else that we should know? What about other areas that have been authorised for treatment?
Okay. Domestic lawns can be professionally treated. In fact, they're allowed a 100% treatment area.
Okay, well, that's interesting. And so good news for the lawn care industry. What about any other amenity areas? How are they placed?
Well, if it's managed amenity turf, like sports pitches or bowling greens, then they can spot treat up to a 10% total area.
Oh, well, that's good. And that's new as well, isn't it? We didn't have that on the emergency authorisations. And so better news for them. Okay, so We now have a full label approval for Acelepryn, but as always, it means that we are going to have to use it carefully and appropriately and build it into our integrated strategies, that we've been talking about so much in previous episodes. And the aim is, to incorporate it to help us protect affected courses and ultimately to deliver those golfing conditions that the players expect.
Yeah, that's the whole point.
Yeah, it is, yeah. Okay, so we're now in the chafer treatment season, Sean. What about a quick run through the best practice advice for achieving optimal control?
Yeah, perfect. So we are timing our application to be at the later stages of peak flight.
Yeah.
So constant monitoring for beetle activity will be necessary.
Yeah.
I will be providing regular updates.
Yes.
If you keep in touch with my Syngenta Turf blog.
Yes, of course. And that is because we are applying proactively to control those early stage grubs, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a really important point, Henry. Acelepryn is only effective on the young grubs, so it's those first and second instars. Larger grubs are not going to be controlled in the same way. So we need to get this product on early to target the development of young grubs.
Okay. And so this is where knowing or the identification of your chafer species becomes important.
Yeah.
Because some species have longer life cycles, don't they? And those species that have 2 or 3 year life cycles, where there will be a greater proportion of later stage grubs in the soil, then their level of control with an application of Acelepryn will be reduced.
Yeah, that's a really good point. For the control of garden chafers, which have a fairly straightforward 1 year life cycle, you can get pretty good levels of control. But with the Welsh and summer and cockchafers, that first year control isn't going to be enough. You're going to need more of a committed approach over 2 to 3 years.
Yes.
So it's important to manage expectations there.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's fine, and hopefully we'll be somewhere down the line with that already, with the emergency authorization having already been in place. Okay, so what about things like mowing prior to application?
Yeah, treated areas should be mown prior to application to help us target a soil application.
Okay, and what about the application itself?
So we want to be applying at 0.6 litres a hectare in 500 to 600 litres of water, using a Syngenta XC white nozzle or a suitable air induction 08 size nozzle, and operating pressure between 2 and 4 bars of pressure, always to minimize drift.
Yes.
We do need to be mindful of minimizing the impact of our treatments on non-target organisms, definitely including bees.
Yeah.
And so we must read and follow all instructions on the label.
Okay, so what should we be thinking about then?
So make sure you're applying when bees are less active, which can be early in the mornings. Bees are less likely to be foraging then.
Okay.
And be mindful of nearby flowering plants and pollinator habitats. Also avoid spraying Acelepryn directly on or near blooming flowers that may attract bees.
Yes.
And of course, incorporate IPM practices, which focus on the use of multiple strategies to manage pests effectively.
Okay, so what like?
So this may include employing biological controls, cultural practices, and targeted treatments to minimize the reliance on insecticides.
Okay, well, that's very clear, Sean. All right, just thinking about it, what about the use of a wetting agent with the application, with it being soil acting?
Yeah, I can see the thought process. It's not necessarily, but we do need to ensure that the soil profile is not hydrophobic at the time of application.
Okay.
Syngenta wetting agent Quilibra is compatible with Acelepryn for convenient application in tank mix or in sequence.
Okay, and what about after treatment care?
We want to keep those surfaces irrigated where possible. It's really important that we keep the pest larvae towards the top of that soil profile.
Yes.
If it's drying out, they're going to be moving down and we're not going to be able to target them effectively.
Okay.
So keeping that top area irrigated. And we want to delay mowing for as long as possible and return the clippings if feasible.
Yeah. Very good, Sean, because, although there are no longer any specific stewardship requirements associated with either the purchase or the use of the product, it's still really important that we use it correctly.
It is indeed. Now, this is the UK label,
yes,
and we're regulated slightly differently to the rest of Europe, so it's not the same for Ireland.
Oh, yes. And so what are the main differences between the UK and the Ireland labels then?
So as with any product, it's important to read the label in your location and understand what it means for your situation.
Yes.
And as we move down this Brexit road, we'll begin to see these differences between the UK and Europe. This might be the first indication of how UK labels will look in the future.
Okay.
For Ireland, the major difference is they don't have that 10% area restriction. The label is not restricting the size of area which can be treated. So it's a bit like what UK lawn care is having. Irish users can treat up to 100% of highly managed amenity turf grass and amenity grassland areas. Their water rate is 500 litres a hectare instead of 500 to 600.
Okay.
And their label states they need to irrigate immediately post application if possible. The rest is very similar, 0.6 litre rate, just one application per year.
So actually some important differences there for the Ireland label. So we do need to be clear when we're talking about it.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that, Sean. That's excellent.
Was that all okay for you?
Yes, very good indeed. And although it might be a little complicated, especially with those two labels going on, the full approval of Acelepryn is certainly good news.
Yes, but we must use it properly.
Yeah, we must indeed. And whilst it feels like a lifetime away, casting our minds forward onto that horizon. What about the leather jacket season, Sean? Any thoughts on that before we go?
Well, Henry, it'll be here sooner than you think.
Yeah.
So just to mention for now, Pest Tracker data has shown that peak flight for leather jackets can stretch all through October. Okay. So we would advise that you would make sure you get an application done before the start of November.
Okay. So we're already thinking about the autumn, Sean.
So good news, Henry. But as with all new approvals, there are some restrictions in place to make sure that we use the product correctly and minimise any risk to non-targets.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great product, isn't it? Which we know, but we still need to read that label and take all those recommended precautions. Now, we have a rare treat this month, don't we?
Yes, we do. We have a very special guest. Taking top billing with James Bledge, the links manager at Royal Liverpool Golf Club, talking about having an open looming very large on his horizon.
Very good, Glenn.
We're very fortunate today that James Bledge, the links manager at Royal Liverpool, the venue of the 2023 Open Championship, has taken some time out of his busy schedule to join us in the build-up to this magnificent event. James, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thanks for asking me on, Glenn. Very, very privileged to be on. And it's nice to be this side of the microphone as opposed to the other for a change.
You don't listen to us, do you?
Yeah, of course I do. I've always listened to it from the start, yeah.
Oh dear. Anyway, we're recording this on the 15th of May. So we're about 9 weeks out from your event, which starts in earnest around the 16th of July. Is that right? Sunday the 16th of July?
Looking across to my wall planner, it is the 20th of July is the Thursday and it finishes on the 23rd. I hope I've got the right week.
Yeah, so do I, mate. Otherwise, you're in trouble.
Aye.
Look, tell us, how are those preparations going? How are you feeling?
So, we've had a really good spring. I think the weather's been excellent. We've had a nice, mild, wet spring, which everyone knows is great growing weather. The rough's starting to grow a bit now after having very, very lean roughs going into this. And, yeah, we've got good definition. The surfaces are really primed in good position just now, and we're just starting to work on refinement. But the biggest thing is really, it's mind-blowing how much the course grows day on day with infrastructure, tented village, grandstands, you name it. It's starting to look like an open venue already, and we're quite far out. So God knows what it's going to look like in another month's time. I mean, it looks like the real deal already, and we've still got quite a bit to go.
Yeah, so this would be your first Open that you're managing, but I'm imagining you've been to quite a few in the past.
I've been to quite a few Opens, and I was lucky enough to work shadow Sandy Reid at St Andrews last year, which was amazing. I've worked with the RNA for years with amateur championships, final and qualifyings, and I think the nicest kind of story I had when I was a young lad, I sat behind the 18th green at Turnberry when Nick Price won, and was just in awe of the whole thing, you know, and it wasn't half the animal that it is now. It's huge now, and I took some grass out of the rough and put it in a little plastic bag and put it in the bottom of my Ping L8 bag for good luck. And to think now that I'm a couple of months away from hosting one is pretty crazy. But yeah, we're all in a good spot, and it's pretty stress free just now, and as far as I'm concerned, hopefully that'll continue.
Oh, no, it's amazing. I think it's most people's career goal or ambition as a young greenkeeper to manage that kind of event, and a lot of work goes into getting you there. But before we move into the agronomics, which I really want to kind of focus this podcast on a little bit later, talk me through the kind of things that have caught you by surprise, or the things that probably people wouldn't understand about the build up to an event like this, because you're right. I've seen some of the images you've posted on Twitter, and the infrastructure is just huge for an event like this these days.
Do you know, it's all the stuff that happens behind the scenes. We've got a guy that comes in and does all the water in and sewerage out, and I mean, planning all that is a huge job. There's things like there's new walls being built, areas that we need to make more secure. I mean, I don't think anyone will ever understand what goes on unless you've worked at an open course, what goes on behind the scenes, and people turn up at the gates on the Thursday or whatever and they enjoy a really nice opening, a good day out and some beers, but it's all the stuff that goes into prepping that is, I've been actually quite taken aback by it. Fibre optic, for example, all this kilometres and kilometres of fibre optics, and when you see them all come to an end in a big green box and you're looking at all these hairs of fibre everywhere, I mean, I don't know anything about that. For me, that's utterly mind-blowing, and one of the guys takes you to the hub where it all comes to an end from all over the course, and I don't know if you've ever seen anything like this, but I just can't get my head around it. And I said to him the other day, I think actually growing grass is probably quite easy compared to this. And he's like, oh God, no, I look at your job and think it looks impossible. But I'm like, my mind is absolutely frying here in this shipping container, looking at all these wires coming out everywhere. Where do you even start if the television signal goes down? How do you trace it? And because there's stuff everywhere. But I mean, all the work with the television, I mean, the work that the RNA do behind the scenes to bring everything together it's truly special, and that's why it's the greatest golfing event in the world.
Yeah, and it doesn't just stop at the event, does it? You've got all of that breakdown to do as well.
Come August, it will start to kind of pull it all back down again, and then it'll be up to us, myself and the team, to fix everything, you know, reinstate everything. But with that, we work with an ecologist to ensure that everything's done properly, and I guess in a lot of these cases it's a case of sitting in your hands, not trying to force it, you know, bringing the roughs back, etc. But there's a lot of good done by it, you know, and a good chance to kind of reassess what to do with the golf course afterwards. But yeah, it's thoroughly exciting, but as I said, you'll never understand the scale of it until you're working on it day in, day out, really.
No, it's. I can only imagine it's huge. It's a massive undertaking, and with all of that going on, how much time does that give you to focus on the golf course? Is that a big drain on your time?
It's actually very little a drain on our time. You know, I think the way that it's been set up, everyone has their job here. There's guys in charge of the tented village, there's guys in charge of the contractors compound, all the grandstand build, and we don't really have anything to do with them, to be honest. We work with them, so if they're going to be going into an area that they might say to us, look, tell us where your sprinkler heads are so we can build a grandstand around it, or for crossing points where your sprinklers are there, if we're going to put signposts in. Yeah, the odd thing gets hit, but that's just life. You know, there's no way you're going to build this infrastructure without having some sort of damage. Yeah, that's the only way we do that, is we work with them to make sure that everything is perfect when it comes to that.
Good. And one of the things you did mention there, James, was ecology. And I know the RNA have got a pretty strong focus on sustainability and ecology. What sort of demands is that placing on you, and what has anything caught you by surprise on that?
Well, I wouldn't say it's because we've got the Open. Our strategy has changed at all. You know, we're obviously seeking to be the kind of most environmentally friendly golf course we can be. Yes, there's kind of areas that need to be protected should any wildlife start to habit these areas. But for like infrastructure areas, where there's 7 hectares of infrastructure areas, so all this is all cut down well before nesting season. And it's all cut down short, so there's no chance of any birds nesting at these points. So everything there is kept safe. And then there's an environmental management plan put together to reinstate the area afterwards. So everything's very well looked after in that respect. And we have our 2 ecologists on site quite often to make sure that everything's hunky-dory.
Great. So there's probably a bigger investment in kind of monitoring and putting plans together, putting you in the best position you can be.
I would say so, yeah. These ecologists travel from open site to open site, so they know the challenges that we do face, and they've been very successful in these other open sites in the past, so I can't see any issues coming this way. And just at the other end of a phone, whether it's between if we have issues with natterjack toads on the course. I mean, the other week we were rescuing some frogs and toads from valve boxes, but myself and another member of staff went and did a course on natterjack toads up in Scotland a few weeks ago. Should any come onto the greens during the Open, we know how to deal with them.
Have you got natterjack toads on site then?
Yes, well, just before this podcast, I literally was down on the seafront with the ecologists just there looking at the spawn strings and the tadpoles, and we've got plenty coming around just now. In fact, the other night I was walking up, I live on site, and I was walking up the drive back up to the house, and I could hear the rabbit, 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 the chorus from the natterjacks. So I walked right down towards the beach with a torch to see if I could see anything or hear it again, but it all stopped. But yeah, they're definitely starting just now. They're starting to mate. So it's one of the kind of most protected areas. This part from Red Rocks, it's called, right along the seafront. We've got 2 natterjack toad ponds that we actually look after ourselves, and we fence off, and we bring the fencing on and off and on and off to make sure they're safe. But it's definitely something we're trying to encourage with sand scrapes and ponds, yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I came up to visit you earlier in the year, and that was pretty impressive, all the sand scrape work you've done there. Look, before we go into that too much, if we start thinking outside of those kind of challenges, the ecological and environmental challenges that you're dealing with so well, but inevitably taking up some of your time, kind of stands, forklifts, tented village, fibre optic cables, all of that. The golf course is the centre of the event, and the big thing that's going to be kind of you're going to be judged by inevitably. That's what the world's eyes are going to be on. What are the kind of agronomic challenges that you're really focused on and thinking about now and in the build up to this event for the golf course?
Well, to host an event like this, the thing you've got to think about that will test the best players in the world is firmness is probably the key, really. Not necessarily in fairways, although we want firm fast fairways, but green surrounds and greens. If you can have firm greens, then you're challenging the best players to seek out these pins. If you can have pins that are tucked, then they need to think more as how to play the running shot in. You watch a lot of these. I mean, the US Open, for example. That's maybe a bad example because they do firm their greens and dry their greens up. But your standard PGA Tour event, whether it's target golf, where there's balls coming in from high and they can just bang them right into the pins, is not as much skill as what they would be for playing fast firm surfaces where caddy needs to give them a yardage and an exact spot to land it. Because of the green undulations and the surround undulations around Hoylake, it's much more of a skill to do that. You look at Tiger Woods' win when he plotted his way around the golf course here. Rory McIlroy, the same, both world number 1 at the time. This course is a brilliant course for challenging these very best players, and firm surfaces will do that. So it's one thing we really worked on I've been here for 15 months now, and we've dry jacked the greens 4 times, trying to get all our natural fine sands into that top, say 40 mil we've been concentrating on mostly. Below that, we've actually had really good results. And just increasing that bulk density, laying off the aeration actually to make sure these surfaces are packed tighter at the top. We've been doing some surface aeration with slitters, etc., but No deep aeration, certainly no coring until after the Open. But just keep getting that sand in. I mean, I think we were about 180 tonnes last year, and the OM dropped from around 7% now, well, 7.5% in some, right down to, I mean, we're sitting about 4.5 now in quite a lot of them. So with that, we can control the parameters more. We've got full control over how firm and I guess how that leads to speed as well. They're going to be for the tournament, so we're not kind of fighting that all the time. So it's just going to be a case of cutting, refining work until then. We're out there with the ultra groomers every 3 weeks probably, just tickling the surfaces up, getting rid of anything kind of fatter and a bit less desirable, and just trying to get the speed. So yeah, I think we'll put on a little bit of fertiliser on the greens. We've got going with a 7014, which is one of your products, I do believe.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's one of ICL's, definitely.
Yeah. Well, we do use quite a bit of ICL stuff here. This isn't an advert for ICL. Other products are available. No, they're not.
Not sure they are on a Syngenta ICL podcast, James.
But I really like the ICL products, and we've actually pretty much almost for exclusive here ICL. And so a 7014, 6 weeks out from the tournament, to ensure that, because we are up and cutting and maybe putting a little more stress on them through verticutting or whatever, or grooming, that the plant's still growing and it's still healthy, and that takes the stress off them there. So yeah, I think we'll probably lay off the top dressing now for that. But the firmness, I've absolutely gone off on a tangent here, haven't I, Glenn?
No, it's brilliant, mate.
I think firmness is that's what we're looking for, without a doubt.
Okay, so what I'm really interested in now is, you're talking about how you're doing this kind of stuff and targeting it around the Open week when you're trying to provide the ultimate test for golfers. How is that differing to what you would be doing next year when you maybe wouldn't have the same tournament challenges? Is it realistic for you to back off on that aeration? Is there a change of strategy that's purely about this year, or is that kind of a long-term goal?
I would say that's probably the only change of strategy for this year. In a normal year, when we didn't have to kind of worry about that quite so much, I would be putting a 6 and an 8 mil time through them every 6 weeks probably. However, I was asked this question the other day actually about if what we're doing this year, is it kind of exclusive for the Open? And from my point of view, it's not at all. And it's the same when I'm at my last golf course. This is how I would expect the course to be set up year on year. I'll still have the same amount of staff next year. I'll still have the same budget. So this is the standard that I want and the team want to produce for the membership and the visitors. When they come to play Hoylake, it's a bucket list trip for some people. And I mean, as well as paying thousands to fly across the world, they might get a caddy, they might buy a t-shirt, they'll spend money in the clubhouse. Like, you want to give them an open golf course, and I am 100% confident we can give them that standard day in, day out throughout the summer especially. There is the odd day where we might be spraying or we might be top dressing or whatever, but I mean, everyone needs to do that, let's face it. But I don't think it's out with our realms of achievability to do that.
No, and it's good in the sense that what we're talking about here doesn't just tie in with great playing surfaces, it also ties in with agronomic parameters as well. For those that listen to the podcast regularly will know that Henry places a very strong focus over a green smoothness rather than green speed, which generally comes from having firmer surfaces that can withstand the footprinting that you get in a busy golf course and all of those things. So, and the less thatch and fibre you've got there, the less moisture you're holding on to, the better you're going to put yourself in a kind of better position for reduced diseases and impact like that. So it's very much the way to go. You mentioned budget, and you are an open venue that is having open standards demanded of when you get those green fees. What lessons have you learned at a course like this that you think you could take to a kind of normal 6-man team to kind of try and move along in a similar direction? What is transferable and what is just out of reach of the normal golf course?
There's things that don't cost any money at all to do. Proper planning, proper teamwork, I think attention to detail on the golf course, whether that be just weeding around paths where there's weeds growing, I just think there's a lot of stuff that doesn't cost much money to do. Yes, I am lucky to enjoy a good budget. We've got a fantastic fleet of machinery, a decent sized team, but I would say just exactly that. It's a lot of it just comes down to your practices and what you prioritise over another. Getting the basics right day in, day out, and not getting too kind of far ahead of your station for realising you try to do too much with a 6-man team, I would say.
So if we look at those surfaces again, where you're very much placing firmness at the top of your list, are you gathering any data to help kind of support your decision-making process?
Yes, we do fortnightly. Clegg, moisture and stimp readings, just to kind of benchmark where we are. I've got a good story about that. So I've really not been in a good place the last few months, because every time I send my guy out to do the readings, he's coming back and he's like 85 Bledge, 88, and I'm like, oh my god, this is terrible. They're really, because that's, for anyone listening that doesn't have a Clegg, 88 for a links course, it's actually quite soft. And we had a walk on one of the greens with our agronomist the other week, and he's like, God, these are firm. These are firm. And I was like, yeah, they are, but we're not getting, because obviously he gets the data, and he's like, it doesn't feel like an 85 or an 88. So he's like, well, let me go and get my Clegg hammer. So he got his Clegg hammer, he dropped it in the middle of the first green, 120. I was like, how can this be? So we dropped them both on a valve box cover, because of the consistent surface, and mine's was 230 and his was 250. So it gets sent back, so we're getting recalibrated. But oh my god, honestly, sleepless nights when you're coming out with these readings. But they don't pitch mark just now, they are really firm, decent speed. I'm not a big speed hunter. I actually don't like to stimp the greens. In fact, I think someone had texted the other night in one of the groups, someone in Hoylake, I think they were just winding me up, but they were just saying, the greens were a wee bit slow today, Bledge, and he put a laughing emoji, so he was probably just on the wind up. But so I went out when Jen started watching Eurovision. I thought, I'll go out with the dog and the putter and have a putt instead. And I prefer to do that. I prefer to go out and have a putt. I don't like getting hung up on stimp meter readings. I think they depress greenkeepers, and I think they hold us to ransom a lot of the time. What are the stimp readings? I'll never be a course that posts its stimp readings on the first tee. I really believe in the most key thing is smoothness and firmness, and then probably speed last. But with the Open, we will be trying to achieve, it's no secret that every Open course really tries to go for about 10.5 feet, which is probably by American standards medium pace. But that's a good speed. And for members golf, every foot you add onto that probably adds an hour onto their playing time. I honestly believe that a speed of, for through the week golf, 8.5, 9 feet is really good speed for these greens. And for the capability of the average golfer, average visitor that plays here, 8.5, 9 is a good speed.
And I always think that those speeds just allow you to utilise so many more interesting pin positions, and particularly for the Open, if you want to be testing those best golfers and tucking those pins in. Mm-hmm. If you were running up at 11, 12, like some greens can, I do wonder how many of those pin positions would actually be usable. And
you also don't know when the weather can change. If the tide's coming in, the weather isn't always perfect here. For example, I planned today to do my monthly Colibra application. So I had one of the boys in at 5 o'clock this morning. I woke up at 2:30 this morning because I live on site, and I could hear the wind, and I'm like, it only said it was going to be 14 kilometres an hour, and it's gusting. It's gone down to 8 just now, but it was gusting this morning at 30. That wind can be wrong a lot of the time, and if you have greens that are stimping over 11 feet, then you got the risk of the Open being halted. And that just plays absolute havoc with television rights, etc., and television times. So you need to be sensible about these things. And there's year on year many a successful Open ran on greens that are 10 feet, 10.5. I'm pretty sure that the Troon was maybe less than that when Henrik Stenson won, because they were really scared of wind. So don't tend to get too many complaints from golfers about speed, but it's obviously, every greenkeeper listening to this just now will probably empathise with the fact that it's usually the golfer's biggest grumble, isn't it?
So from your point of view, your priorities are firmness and smoothness pretty tight together, green speeds, thirds. You can measure your firmness with your clay hammer. You can measure your green speed with a stimp meter. Is it fair to say the reason you take a putter out and have a putt is because that's your way of measuring that smoothness?
Exactly that. Yes, we don't really have anything. I remember the STRI had their smoothness meter, but there's really nothing kicking about just now. I know the USGA were about to release the golf ball thing that they throw down and it tests everything, but there's not really much more come of that just yet. But I am even though I do like my technology and stuff, I'm quite forward thinking when it comes to that. I am quite old school in a lot of respects, and I just don't think you can beat taking a putter out. I'd actually encourage some of the staff to do that when they're changing holes. Take a putter out and have a whack and see if you think it's fair or not.
I completely agree. I'd like something empirical that will help us gather that data on smoothness, and I don't think we're there yet. But like you say, technology is really moving on, so it'd be lovely if at some point in the near future we could get something to start measuring those smoothness factors, because I think that would move. I don't mind being held to ransom a little bit on smoothness, because it feels like then the priority is being put in the right place. But when you hold to ransom on speed, it feels like we're moving people down the wrong line, particularly when we start looking at those agronomic challenges.
Without a doubt.
So smoothness, firmness, a little bit of focus on speed. How are you achieving that with regards to kind of wetting agent programs, and how does that expand out into the wider area? I kind of pulled some figures out, and at one point, maybe a month ago, it looked like you were heading towards one of the drier years, but it looks like moisture has kind of, rainfall's caught up with you a little bit recently. What are your plans there, and how are you putting those plans in place?
So obviously, in my first year in charge here, the baptism of fire with the driest year in history. We had a full Colibra programme, greens, tees, surrounds, fairways, and this year extended it to all that plus paths and first cut semi-rough. But only doing the first cut semi-rough when it's peeing down and we know that we can get it in there, because I don't want to waste all that irrigation that I'd have to put 6 mil of water on. It's probably 800 cube to do the fairways. So if I had to do that in the semi-rough again, then it wouldn't be great. And your question probably is, well, why don't you just do it at the same time? There's a time issue with that as well, with getting caught with golf, etc. And it's just not imperative just now, really. It doesn't come as a priority. But the last year, at the end of the year, we had such great bounce back with the turf health. I mean, we browned the course right out. We still watered even though it was brown. Used our entire water licence because it was so dry, and the place just pinged back. And I put that down to the Colibra, to be honest with you. It's and this year I've been mixing it with the WSF 2000 with the C-Max in it, so we can take out a bag, the 2000, it can get chucked on the sprayer. We just put that on at 15 kilograms a hectare, but sometimes a bit too much growth, we might nip that down to 10. But it's just very convenient, it's very good, and we've had some good results from it so far. And we mix the Colibra with the 1 kilogram bags of WSF seaweed for the greens and surrounds. We treat them the same. But yeah, I've been really happy with Colibra as a wetting agent. It's tested to the max here. We've got very hydrophobic soils, and it really is given a workout. And there's not really many wetting agents that I've seen that can cope with that kind of stress, especially in weeks 3 to 4. It's quite a difficult week for any wetting agent to have that kind of longevity. But we spray it religiously here on the month, and as I say, it would have been done today, and then this is my week worth of wetting agent. So you're probably going to ask this question, but I can just go on it to save you. Fairy rings, the dreaded fairy ring. So quite a historic site for fairy ring. Fairways, greens were bad in the past. Last year we had a really good year with them. Not too much bother on the greens. A lot of type 1 and type 2s on the fairways, and the type 1s have obviously grown back in with pore, so just now they're looking white with the seed heads. But we have preventative programme of heritage, so 3 applications before they open. Takes away any stress of thatch fungus, any stress of big fairy rings appearing, and so we'll blanket spray the greens for that, just the greens, and we will middle boom job the the sprayer, the fairy rings on the fairways, with what's left over after a 10mm spike, with the Equilibra as well. These also get wetting agent granules and gun and everything, like, you know, to try and keep them moist. But it's just this wet dry cycle. Last year was a bit of a nightmare because it was just so dry. It was so dry, and then you literally you could never get any sort of tinge of green on these fairways. You'd just be using so much water. As I said, if you want to water deep here, 6mm, you're 800 cube a time on your fairways. I mean, that's like a 35th of my allowance, so roughly, which is it's a hell of a lot to lose every time you want to water your fairways. So you're going to get this, and when it does pee down, then you're going to get this wet dry cycle, and that's what kicks them off. So we're kind of hoping that it's fairy ring. You know, I was trying to kind of work out earlier what human disease I would relate it to, because it's one of these diseases we've just got to live with, I think, and I would rather kind of not embrace it. I would never use the word I'll never embrace fairy ring, but I kind of think myself, right, you know what can you do about it? We can try and suppress it as much as possible so it doesn't flare up and it's not super obvious, and I believe that's what we're doing here. That's what we're trying to do with the wetting agents, with the spiking, with using azoxystrobin. But will we ever get rid of it? I don't think so. Not so far. I don't know. You guys maybe have the key to that, and hopefully one day you will have. But so far, it's proven very difficult.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. I think it's a long-term management plan you have to put in place. If you look at the size of a fairy ring, it didn't start that size. It's been there hundreds of years. So no matter how much work you do, and no matter how many times you think you've got on top of it, it's still come back the following year. We're managing symptoms a lot of the time. It's a disease of the soil, so it doesn't actually damage grass. What it's doing is it's making it difficult for the turf to grow in that soil. So we're in this constant management pattern. And hopefully we'll continue to bring technology that makes that management easier for you. But I think you're absolutely spot on. You are always in this management program. I think from a disease point of view, it reminds me of my bad back, James. I can't get rid of my bad back, but I continually manage it. If I'm overweight, then it gets worse. And if I don't do exercise, it gets worse. But when I'm doing all the things I should do, I can cope with it. Okay, so we've touched on fairy ring. We have touched on smooth surfaces. What about dollar spot? I remember seeing some photos of some dollar spot you were seeing a little bit later in the year, last year. What's your kind of management plan or concerns over the element of risk with dollar spot?
Well, I'm guessing you would see it around about August. It's kind of a good time for dollar spot, but we're seeing it just now, believe it or not. So whether or not that's the stuff from last year flaring up, but last year had really good control with it, just with fertility. So I think the pictures I showed you were probably where the spreader had overlapped. So it would be 30 grams a square metre of a 15-5-15, and it had overlapped. So wherever you got the 45 grams was complete control, and the 30 grams was really good. And then maybe on the outside, where you did your first line of wheel to wheel on the left side or whatever, you would have you'd still have signs of it. So I mean, the nutrition side, we try and spray as little fungicides and weed killers, etc., as possible here, you know, with being the kind of site we are. So that's why we went down the nutrition route. But all the dollar spot is just on new fescue turf. It's just been hammering the fescue, but we've got it under control just now, which is good. Again, through the 15-5-15. But yeah, it's scary how much it's coming on. But I do remember from my days working at Kingsbarns, we had quite a bit of dollar spot then. That would be 15 years ago. So it's not as if it's a new thing, but I think it's becoming more prevalent.
Yeah, I think it is. And I've kind of pulled the numbers out for your site, looking at the Smith Kearns model. And that kind of end of July is probably your peak for the dollar spot pressure. Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to go into dollar spot challenges. It means that's when things are kicking off, and that ties in with those images that you sent over last year of August. But it's a real sign of the times that you're seeing it this early in mid-May, and I think that is a worry. Now, I do completely agree, particularly on larger areas. A fungicide strategy is going to be really challenging, and it's going to be probably more nutrition. And there's lots of data coming out of the States saying kind of it's not so much the amount of nutrition, more the intervals between them. But that's not a very links-like strategy, is it, to be putting nutrition out on a little and often basis, or even at those higher quantities you were talking about? How is your strategy kind of going to change over the coming up years if this dollar spot challenge does continue to ramp up?
If it is, I would definitely rein back on the big kind of granular feeds that we have and supplement that with more consistent nutrition. The greens, well, everything's sprayed monthly anyway, so to chuck a little bit of sulfate ammonia in with that mix, nice and cheap, and even if you're chucking on, I guess, a couple of kilograms a month might help. Who knows? Just now the strategy is a 4014 invigorator at this. When would that go down? March, and then a 306 in May, and then in June 7014. We're really hitting up about 60 kilograms of nitrogen a year.
Right.
But if this dollar spot, but it's only, I will enthuse that it's just these new fescue areas that have come from turf farms. So whether the cultivars have not been as good on the dollar spot is probably the key. And I mean, we're out top dressing them today because they're just that little bit spongier, you know. But these are just the areas. So I've not seen it as much on the rest of the golf course. I'm not as worried about it, but it'd be interesting to see if anyone else has had dollar spot issues with newly grown turf.
Yeah, and I think that's a key point there. Varieties of grass species have a big influence on how much pressure they can see. And the UK, whilst we're moving into higher pressure and more consistent pressure, is not a high pressure site. If we go over to Germany or kind of south of France, those places are high pressure, but we're not there yet. And I think a lot of what we do to manage dollar spot can come from cultural practices and, you know, moisture control, dew control, good wetting agent programs, good nutrition or tweaked nutrition programs, not necessarily more just a little bit of better understanding about using a controlled release rather than a traditional granule or tighter applications through peak periods, and looking at digital models to help us decide when the best times to do that are. So, you know, it's interesting that even, you know, you're moving ahead on that without probably thinking about it. It's just that kind of proactive greenkeeping mindset, isn't it?
It's not a nice disease to look at, you know, and just now, luckily, it's more foliar, it's more on the leaf. We don't really have much making its way down to the crown, which is good. So, and literally a week after application of the last 15, you could see that it was feeding it out, which is nice, and it's growing it back in. But the problem with that, it's not ideal either, because then you're bailing loads of grass off these areas, you know, and on a new fescue sward is not ideal either, because then it's getting puffier, it's getting softer, so you're having to go back out and chuck some sand down. And, you know, you kind of think at the start, in the days of a contact fungicide, you could have just dealt with it straight away, but we're not in these days anymore, so you need to look at other ways. And I guess it's a lot more environmentally friendly putting a wee bit of fertiliser down than it is spraying a fungicide.
Yeah, and I think you've kind of hit the nail on the head there. If we look at modern day greenkeeping and good practice for agronomics, as you say, with less immediately available kind of contact fungicide technology, we have to sit in the middle ground a lot more. We have to kind of look at, all right, fairy rings, we can't let things dry out, we can't let things get too wet. Dollar spot, we've got to look at the right amount of nutrition without driving too much thatch. And we've got all of these things where we need to sit right in that middle ground and just be aware that one way or the other could move us into problems. So it is getting tougher and tougher and tougher. And I think part of that is gathering all that data to help keep us in the right place.
I think we're perfectionists as well, you know. The slightest tiny bit of disease or weed or whatever, like, you're on it now, and you're like, I mean, I literally lie in bed this morning thinking, right, I played a few holes last night, and I've actually seen a couple of buttercups on the first fairway and stuff, and that's just not on. So how are we going to deal with that? And if there's going to be too many of them, it's going to be a blanket spray, but we don't want to do that. So we actually issued we've got a brilliant artisan section, and this is a good thing to talk about, because when we're talking about everything that goes on behind the scenes, as well as my team that do an awesome job, you've got the artisan section, the village play they call them here. They do all the divoting, and they're so happy to kind of help out with everything else. So we bought 36 daisy forks off Amazon, and we put them to a hole and get them to pick the daisies out. And they're not daisies, sorry, cat's ear. There's cat's ear we've got in the fairways. So instead of spraying a blanket herbicide. Getting some. We've got the labour there. Let's use them, and they can any big cats here they pull out, we can divot. So that's what they've been doing just now. But yeah, these are the things that stupidly keep you awake. Thinking about. We're looking for perfection. I am a perfectionist. I want perfection for the Open, but to be fair, it's not that kind of site, is it? It is a natural bit of links land that if there's a couple of wee chunks out there of it in, or there's some wildflowers, or anything growing outside of the fringing rough, you class as a wildflower. It might be a weed, could be daisies or buttercups, but we keep them there, don't we? Because it is a natural bit of land, and that kind of goes back to the fairy ring. When the Americans are watching the Open and they're seeing brown fairies, they might. I mean, when they watched the Tiger Open, they must have thought, Jesus, it's like playing on the moon, because it was dust then. It was the same colour as my table. But this is natural, and this is the way that things need to be. And I guess we need to educate people that, look, if you've got a fairy ring, so what? You obviously don't want greens riddled with fusarium or door spot or whatever. But I think there needs to be a bit of acceptability sometimes. But I'm such a hypocrite saying that, because I don't accept anything. I am a perfectionist.
And I think this comes back to, what does the playing surface look like? So it's the tolerance of a visual disease. If there's a fairy ring that's really impacting the playing surface, it's how do we manage that? Mm-hmm. And if it's like microdocium you mentioned, that can be brutal on putting surfaces. Mm-hmm. So it's getting back to this basis of how smooth is that playing surface, or for fairways, how appropriate is that surface to be striking the ball off of? And I think that's a really good point. Well,
I think all the practices we've done the last year, and all the great work that Craig Gillum done before me, my predecessor, it's set up. I mean, it's appropriate and apt to kind of pay homage to all the good work that's done before with everything else. So it's not just like I've jumped in here 15 months ago and turned it around. It's certainly not that. I mean, everyone like Phil Collinson will tell you that he's been coming here for years, and the place is fantastic. It is an awesome golf course. It's just been left a really nice, what's the word I'm looking for? I've been given a really nice thing to take on, so I'm getting a bit tongue-tied. But I'm very lucky that way. It's good.
Yeah, no, you picked up a huge amount of investment from Craig. I always remember coming up to visit Craig and was always very impressed with everything he was doing. In fact, I was in awe of it. So, yeah, it's not like you've picked up something that you've got to turn around very quickly. And, that leads me to the kind of the last point I think I want to make, or the last question. Obviously, a lot of prep work and a lot of investment goes in for this 1 week of the year. Is there any detriment to that later down the line? Do you see any problems in August, September because of how hard you've worked the surfaces? Or do you think you've got a strategy to avoid that? Or is that long-term investment that's being made by the club?
I don't see any problems whatsoever. As I said earlier, if this was the club championship coming up in July, you'd be trying to achieve the same kind of goals. It's not like we're going to be shaving the greens down to 2.5 mil for a couple of weeks and drying them down to 5%, We really hope with everything we've got and the controllability that we can hopefully keep the greens not to really drop below 10% with a good organic matter content and fantastically deep rooting fescues and bents, that we can keep them between 10 and 15. And if we do need to dry them down for a little bit below that, then with our good wetting agent programme and everything else, they'll bounce back. I don't think we're going to be disrespecting the golf course, and doing anything wild to it. In fact, I know we won't be. It's not bullish like that in the slightest. We are all in it together, and we know what needs to be achieved. But I don't see any detrimental effects at all. The only things that we need to recover are going to be walkways. There's going to be 200 and however many thousand, 260, I think, did they say? 260,000 people walking around the course. So these are the only bits that we're going to have to grow back, but that could just be a verti drain and then let nature take its course. I don't even know. I don't even think the ecologists would want any overseeding done in these areas. They want the natural grasses to come back through. So yeah, the Open's a great thing for Royal Liverpool. It's a great thing for the members, for the community, and for our team. The boys are buzzing. What an opportunity, to show 600 million households your golf course. I mean, that blows my mind. I'm going to be hiding under my desk. I don't. you always are nervous about the first television pictures of your golf course, aren't you? And then you will be. This is where your worst critic comes out, and this is when I tell you about that fairy ring, and it seems like the spotter plane keeps picking it up, but get over it. We need to be kind of praising ourselves for all the good work that's been done, and we'll be so hard on ourselves.
Absolutely, and it's a testament to you and the investment you've made, and Craig before you, and the long-term investment of the club. And the danger for me always with things like that, and I think you summed it up very well by saying you're not going to be bullish, and the R&A isn't banging their fist on the table, demanding things. When you go into your average six-man club, if they're trying to turn things around, and they're turning it around with the wrong tools, by shaving things down, by those additional rolls, by hammering greens, with drying them out too much, that's when you turn around and you can walk into problems later in the year. Whereas the difference with what you've done or what your club is doing is they've invested in this over a long-term program, which means they can turn these things day in, day out. The quality is there. And I think that's it's great to hear you say that, because I think that will help a lot of golf course managers around the country just explain to their clubs how you come up with those kind of conditions day in, day out, and not everyone is blessed with that situation and that support.
Yeah, I'm very lucky. I mean, the great thing as well is everything we talk about with Alistair Beggs, our RNA agronomist, it is a discussion. That's what it is. There's no dictatorship in the slightest. We look at different ways of doing things and achieving the goals, and I actually really look forward to our course walks that we have. They're enjoyable because they're good fun. It's a fun environment, with even all the top dogs, and I don't find it stressful. It's not like your school Ofsted report where you're coming, you're dreading it, and you're looking for another hammer. And the team worked really hard, and we understand that on these inspection days that you want the place to be looking as kind of close to the open condition as it would be. You do want to show it off, but to be honest, it's not really different from the other days, because we take you out there today, the golfers will be enjoying on a Monday, they'll be enjoying a course that's not a kick in the backside off what the Open would be.
Look, all of this doesn't happen. You've mentioned Craig, and obviously we've been talking about your views and take on it, but none of this happens on your own, does it? How's the team shaping up, and what's the kind of volunteer support look like for an event like this?
When I first got the job, I spoke to a few people as to how many volunteers they would have. And I remember Graham Beat at Portrush today had about 50, so we was kind of working off that number. So when I started penning down all the jobs and who I'd need for what, we came to 47, so that was including myself and Alistair Begg, so 45. And I wanted to build a team that was diverse and experienced, from top course managers through to young apprentices. So for that, we've got Lee Strutt coming from Cabot, we've got Sean McLean at Birkdale, we've got Matt Plested down at Stoneham, John McLaughlin, so all these guys are not only the absolute best in the industry, but they're great mentors. They can talk to other people, and I want to make it a really good networking opportunity for people try to make their way through greenkeeping like I did.
Sure.
And they'll have friends for life with these people, because like Strutty, for example, he would sit down with a 17-year-old that he's never met before and talk the hind legs off him. And I love that, and I think that's brilliant. And this is the kind of the team that I wanted to create. So I have got a lot of my good friends working in it, because they hammered me from the minute I got the job, and of course I'd love to have them on board. And I've got a lot of local guys, but I ran the apprentice competition, and a little nice story actually come out of this yesterday. So the apprentice competition asked 5 questions about if we were going to rename the 17th hole, what would we call it, blah blah. So we've got three youngsters, I think they're all under 19 or whatever. Sam, Max, Greg, who Greg just joined this morning because one of the guys from Turnberry can't make it. So I got a volunteer from every course on the open rota as well, which is nice.
Great.
They come for longer. So we've managed to swap Greg in. So we've got 3 apprentices that are coming. 2 of them are hand cutting greens as well. One on bunkers. So what an amazing job for a 17, 18-year-old to do. Come to the Open. We'll look after them. I mean, ICL, you guys are and Syngenta are both kind enough to sponsor the uniform at the Open, which is very much appreciated. And we're going to have nice Syngenta waterproofs and ICL jumpers, I think. Yeah. So They're going to look smart, and I'm making an open volunteer booklet for them so they know who all we are, about where to go, how everything, where you're staying, blah blah, and about the sponsors, how to get round, and so there's a lot of planning work that goes into this, but it is certainly a diverse team. And as I said, plan. What's the saying? The 5 P's, isn't it? Proper planning prevents poor performance.
Poor performance, that's the one.
That's right. And if my dad had 6 P's, and it was a swear word in there as well.
There was,
so
yeah.
You can. But yeah, I think I'm excited for all the guys to meet each other. We'll be doing health and safety training together, and I'm looking forward to the Sunday night actually, and then having a good drink with everyone. And I think that was the last question actually in the quiz that we did. So I put it on Twitter, and we made a Google Forms, and it all came through in a spreadsheet, and I deleted everyone's name and club off it, so it was a fair competition, so I could just read the answers.
Yeah.
And the last question was like, because I love my music, it was if you were to ask the DJ for one song on the Sunday night at our party, what would you ask him? So anyone with good taste got in.
Oh, there you go. What was the winning song?
Oh God, what was the winning song? There was like ABBA songs and all sorts of stuff. There wasn't anything that I absolutely loved, but they were all good answers. All good answers.
Very good.
I could probably get it up with it. By the time you finish this, I can get it up and I'll tell you.
Very nice. James, it's always lovely to talk to you. I'm always amazed by how focused you are, not only on the agronomics, but the wider scale golfing environment, the golfer experience, and also your team. I think it's absolute credit to you. I mean, I know a lot of golf course managers. I know very few that are as passionate about all pillars of the greenkeeping needs and requirements as you are. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Look, best of luck to you and all of your team and all of those volunteers and everyone involved. I really hope the weather is with you, because the British weather isn't always as useful as it can be. And best of luck, mate.
Yeah, I think that's what it all comes down to. It's the weather at the end of the day. You can't beat Mother Nature, so she'll provide the golf course that everyone will be playing at the Open. And yeah, we'll just have to we'll try our hardest round about that. But yeah, thanks very much for asking me on. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Well, that was great, Glenn, and very interesting indeed. And of course, a huge thank you must go to James for giving us all a little glimpse into his world as he prepares for the Open.
Yes, we had that chat in mid-May, and so I'm sure things will have moved on since then. It's been quite dry since then. But we thank him very much and wish him and all those involved in the championships good luck and every success at finding our champion golfer for the year.
Yes, and I will be there on the Thursday, and I can't wait, Glenn. Okay, Glenn, so what have you got for our application tip of the month?
Wow, Henry. As the heat of summer escalates, so do the complexities confronting golf course managers. And today I thought we should delve a little into the subject of summer heat and spraying in it.
Very good, Glenn.
Okay, the first issue I'd like to tackle is the strategies we can employ when applying to heat-stressed turf. As we know, during the month of July, we are likely to encounter elevated levels of heat stress.
Okay, so what are the do's and don'ts then of spraying in the heat?
Well, Henry, plants under the duress of the warm and stressed conditions will often shut their stomata down to conserve water and energy. Consequently, products absorbed by the leaf may not be as effective in the extreme heat, leading to additional stress and potential plant weakening. In such scenarios, the primary step should be to alleviate the stress first. And in the UK, the key to alleviating that stress is generally maintaining adequate soil moisture. So while the temperatures we get alone tend not to, except in real extremes, induce significant stress, it's when the temperatures we experience is paired with low soil moisture that problems arise. So the golden rule here is make sure you manage any serious stress before proceeding with spraying.
Okay, simple stuff. But in these high heat, stressful situations, are there any specific products that you would avoid using?
Well, Henry, under stressy conditions, I would generally steer clear of surfactants, plant growth regulators, fungicides, fertilisers. However, I might consider using Rider or HiCure in those situations.
Yeah.
Rider's UV protection could be beneficial in those stress scenarios, and the amino acids in HiCure can help to slow down the protein breakdown because the plant will break down those proteins into amino acids during the heat, and this can help in those situations. Otherwise, most products in this situation, if you've got real heat stress and stress going on, the best case scenario is they won't have a big effect. Worst case scenario is they could well make the situation a lot worse. So the main priority now should be to bring that stress under control first. Once that's achieved, you can consider resuming your maintenance programs.
Yeah, and so for things like the greens, and that might not be an issue, but for other areas where we don't have such control on them, it might just sort of have to be a little bit cautious. Okay, so given the hot conditions at this time of year, should we adopt for early morning or late night applications to sidestep the day's most stressful periods?
Well, it's a bit of both, Henry.
All right, you're going to have to clarify that for us, Glenn.
Okay, but before I do, I want to first discuss the impact of something called temperature inversions and how they affect spray applications.
Okay.
So a temperature inversion occurs when warm air rises and cool air settles near the ground, which means we have a layer of cold air with warm air sat on top of it.
Okay.
Now, what happens when that happens? It means when we spray the fine droplets that are caused by too high a pressure or the wrong nozzle, then those fine droplets can lift up in that cold air and just float or move sideways, trapped in that air layer. Now, this is a phenomenon we see when we have warm soil temperatures followed by cool, cloudless nights. Now, these conditions, looking at our weather data, are more likely in the northern part of the country at this time of year, but they will soon be upon us all. And during an inversion, sprayed products just don't disperse as you would traditionally expect. Instead, they just linger and they drift with the slightest airflow, potentially ending up where we don't want them. Now, this poses a real concern as it means the spray can miss its intended target and seriously increases the risk of impacting non-target areas. So it's really bad news and it must be avoided.
Okay.
And typically we see these inversions at the start of dusk and they end at sunrise. And we need to do that to minimize drift. Now, the standard recommendation, if you read any of the documentation, is to avoid spraying in the early morning or the late evening when inversions are more likely. However, these are the typical application times for golf course managers.
Yeah, well, they are, because with golf's inherent schedules, the mornings tend to be, the prime application time, to get round before the golfers start playing. So given the previously discussed stress factors, that can be substantial at this time, I can imagine that, especially during these stress periods, greenkeepers might be motivated to spray even earlier to avoid treating overly stressed turf.
Indeed, and it's somewhat of an invisible problem, an inversion. What appears to be ideal weather, cool and low wind speeds, actually turns out might not be so perfect.
Okay, this is interesting. So how do we recognise that an inversion might be established?
Okay, so temperature inversions are often subtle, but there are some indirect signs. So the kind of thing where you see a ground fog or a layer of dust or smoke moving horizontally at a fixed level, that indicates an inversion. So if you've driven down a dusty path and you see that dust just sitting at one level and floating sideways, that's an inversion. One way to confirm for sure that it's an inversion is to take 2 thermometers at different heights. And if the air is cooler closer to the ground than it is higher up, it's a clear sign of a temperature inversion. Now, I'm not saying that's something we should all go and do all the time. We shouldn't have 2 thermometers that we're walking around with. But it's certainly worth doing to educate yourself and educate your spray operators. So in the future, you can tune yourself in and begin to recognise them.
Okay.
And it's only by understanding these signs that we can then help to prevent that off-target drift during applications.
Okay, very good. And so what what can we do in such a scenario?
Well, it's all about going back to the basics again, Henry. Using the right spraying equipment and strategies to reduce those ultrafine droplets that in turn help reduces the drift. The correct nozzles, the lower pressure, all make a significant difference. And it's those fine droplets that will get caught up in the inversion layer and shift away. The larger droplets, the ones that we want, the ones that we avoid with the correct pressure, the ones that we get by setting our sprayer up properly, are fine. They will hit the target. And I do really worry at this time of year about some of the applications that I see going on. You know, particularly things like fairway applications, a product like Primo out on large areas. I see people spraying quite dormant turf, and the dormant turf's not taking any product in due to the drought stress or the heat stress that it's dealing with. And the fact that they're spraying these larger areas also means that the sprayer is probably going faster than it wants, which in turn means a higher pressure than we want, which in turn means fine droplets, which in turn means higher chances of inversions because we're spraying early in the morning and that stuff is moving sideways, you know. And in those situations, if you're thinking about spraying large areas, ask yourself the question, is it really worth it? Is the turf in a position to take that up? Is the sprayer set up to reduce the chances of drift? Are there any additional risks that you haven't thought of? And what stewardship measures should you be putting in place?
Yeah, that's all really good, Glenn. I think that's right, isn't it? Because when we shouldn't enter into any spray treatment really sort of without thought. And so we've got to make sure that we, are mindful of all the sort of aspects of a treatment and not just sort of, do these things out of habit. So thanks for that. Really good.
Yes, indeed. So stop spraying stress turf and watch out for temperature inversions.
Excellent advice, as always, Glenn. So that's it for another month, Glenn.
Yes, and it feels like July is when everything really comes together.
Yeah, but we still need to keep our wits about us, don't we?
We do indeed.
And so, before we go, once again, we should say a huge thank you to both our guests.
Yes, thank you, Sean, and thank you, James.
Yeah, and Johnny, of course. And good luck to everyone in July. And maybe I'll see some of you up at the Open.
Yes, good luck, everyone, and catch up next month.
Boo.